Well, hello everybody and welcome to the channel. Today's video, fly on the wall experience day. Just getting the GC quad up and running, getting here in the studio because I've got Joe the Pro and I've got James Ruth coming here to Churston today to spend some time together where they're going to have a little look at James's clubs to see if there's any improvements that can be made, some changes to swing weights, some changes to lie angles to try and see if James can get what he wants from his irons, put it that way. Now we're going to do a little fly on the wall moment with it. So we're going to sort of be in the studio here listening to what they're saying. I might have a little bit of an input as we kind of go through, but for the most part I'm going to leave them to it, let them go through it, and then let's see how they get on. This should be really good, really interesting information coming your way. So let's get into the video.
We're on, Dan.
We're on. Go for it.
I've never properly fitted Jimbo. We just did some work a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, to take some numbers, and he just didn't feel like he was getting the most out of his equipment, and potentially rightly so. They've had a lot of use, these irons, so grooves might be getting a little duller. Just feel knackered was the word that James used, wasn't it, James? So he's potentially looking at trying to get a new set, but loves the performance of these. So we're almost trying to match like for like, really. So we're just going to take a load of data. You raised a concern and put it in his head about lie angle, and we're looking at dynamic lie angle when he was trying some Titleist irons. So we're going to do some lie angle checks. There's some swing weight stuff I've noticed already that's moved about since the last time we did this stuff. So yeah, and then talk to James about what he wants to get from it and his concerns of what's going on.
And Jimbo, what do you want to get from this fitting or this session today?
Just a new set of clubs that perform something similar to this. I'm so used to seeing the ball flight, spin rates, everything with these. I got a new set of Srixons 2 years ago where I got fitted up at Sunningdale, but it was an outdoor fitting, no launch monitor. Got fitted for a slightly lighter shaft, so lighter shaft, spinning more. Just I found in wind I was having to really club up and take a lot of speed out of it, so I was changing quite a lot of my game to fit the clubs. And then I got fitted with the Titleist clubs last year, similar sort of thing, launching so much higher. These are quite strong lofted, which is fine. It's just I'm so used to seeing that window of ball flight that any kind of new set I've been getting is just not matching up what I'm used to seeing.
Big question for you. And I actually asked this to somebody who makes golf equipment at the PGA show. And I'm not sure he gave me the answer that I was kind of looking for, I suppose. Jimbo mentioning about the fact that he's got quite stronger lofted irons. Now, historically, I've always gone with the sort of idea that whatever the number is printed on the bottom, times it by 1,000, give or take 500 revs either side of that. So if I was fitting myself for a set of irons, I've always kind of gone down the road of my 7 iron. I want it to spin around anything between 6,500 to 7,000. I'm probably a bit like James, where I see if I get up to 7,500, which is rare with a 7 iron for me, it needs to be quite lofted. I do see those floaty ones as well. Now, is that real? Have I made that up in my head, or is that actually something that, let's say, you would focus on as well with now going through this with James?
It's not a bad rule of thumb. Like, people are obviously, it's right we're saying this without like offending the industry.
Yeah.
People are often looking at ways of simplifying and quantifying, just something to hang your hat on, and that's an easy thing to remember, right? Isn't it? 7 iron means 7,000 revs. It's just so player dependent. If you're someone with a very moderate and low swing speed and you're generating 7,000 revs of spin with a 7 iron, that's a ridiculous amount. It's far too much. You're going to see inefficiencies in flight. If you're a Bryson DeChambeau, look at what Bryson DeChambeau's done. Plug my video there, Dan.
Oh yeah, top
where I played with his irons, where he's had to de-loft so massively to the point where the number on the bottom has no correspondence to a normal 8 iron or a normal 6 iron because of his excessive speed. You put that level of speed into a normal 6 iron, then you're going to see massively excessive amounts of spin. But also it's just so player dependent, condition dependent. I had a chat with James the other night. We were talking about Tiger Woods as an example. He's a guy that likes massive amounts of spin. Everything he sets up with his equipment is on the spinnier side. He uses a really spinny Bridgestone golf ball. He uses really traditional, almost weak lofts because he feels really comfortable in your sort of scenario. You thought spin is my friend, equals control. and he feels really comfortable tuning that down and taking loft off and hitting knockdown shots. So that's something he's really comfortable with. And don't forget, a lot of his golf will be being played at the likes of Augusta, US Open venues, tour venues with rock hard greens, super quick, where he needs a lot of spin to stop them. James and I have been having a chat. That's where ultimately he wants to be. But right now, we're playing a lot more regional PGA golf in windier conditions, softer greens, where you don't necessarily need that massive spin. And when there was a particular event we met at Cleve Hill in Gloucestershire, where it was blowing a hoolie up on the top of a hill, and you're trying to hit a 9-iron that's spinning at 9,500 reps of spin into that wind. He felt he could only get it 110 yards or something, wasn't it? It was like, if that. So it's a decent rule of thumb to start from, but it's so player dependent. And again, some players, like I quite like a low default spin setting to start with, because I feel comfortable cutting the ball up and adding spin and adding height where I need to. James, I feel, is pretty similar to that. And I asked him the question, is there any occasions, even through the summer, where you think, I can't hold this green, I can't stop on this green? And his answer was no, I feel pretty comfortable cutting the ball up. So around the default conditions he might play in, around his swing tendencies, around the ball flight he's got used to seeing, because we did take some loft off these a couple of years ago. He's used to a window now, and he's been conditioned to see a ball coming out of at a certain height and a certain flight, and all of a sudden we messed that up by trying to chase that 9,000 number. I don't think that's the right thing to do with James personally. Initial numbers, you've obviously said you're seeing a little bit, you're struggling to get the distance out of your wedge, particularly your wedge and your 9-iron that we saw last time. So two things, are already loft and lied them, same loft and lie, so that hasn't moved. I know you've had them checked by a couple of people, I think you said recently. So that hasn't moved. One thing that immediately struck out to me, I remember that's not the grips that you had on the clubs when we initially did them. You were like a multi-compound, weren't you? Yeah. Interesting for people watching, actually. If you need to be aware, when you change grips, a lot of these grips have different weights, and as soon as you move the weight around in the grip, so like a standard multi-compound that you had before, 46.5 grams, it's saying on Golf Ride site, so they would have been, the tolerances are so tight, it would have been within half a gram of that. The Tour Velvets you've got on there now, which are 58 rounds, 51.5 grams, so you've got like a 5 gram difference in grip. So what that does now there's more weight up the top end, if you like. Yeah. They're swing weighting lighter, so the overall mass of the club will be 5 grams heavier than it was, because that weight's at the top end. Yeah. Instead of being D2 where we put them at before, they're all measuring at D0, so you essentially got a lighter balance, if you like.
That's measuring at D0 now.
D0, because we've changed like 5 grams worth of grip. So you've got a couple of options. I mean, we're going for a new set anyway, aren't we? So we're not going to butcher these, but if you were trying to get these back, you could just obviously stick back your multi-compounds. You'd notice the balance change, the head would feel slightly heavier, and you'd get a little bit more pop, in my opinion. Yeah. Or if you like those grips, you can just add head weight again. It wouldn't take much to get it up to D2, so probably about 4 grams. And then you'd be back in the same balance point, which I felt we did a bit of work finding that sweet spot of timing for you, and I thought D2 was a great spot for you. So I think there's potential issues around that, so that's a starting point for us. But now I want to measure lie angle. Let's have a little look and see, because Dan raised some concerns about lie angle. So you'd measured the dynamic lie angle on quad, hadn't you? So it was reading when you put stickers on, James, with the Titleist clubs.
Yep.
You were saying it was reading, they were coming out a bit too flat for him, right?
I think so. Toe was down. If I'm right.
Get yourself in here, Jimbo. All right, Harry.
All right.
Oh, crikey, everybody's coming in for a little bit of an inspection.
So we're going old school. I'm not a big believer in the dynamic lie angle readings on launch monitors, so I think the easiest way of measuring lie angle will always be having a straight line on this golf ball. This is something everyone can do at home as well. Get this down nice and vertical, so the line is on the back where James is going to impact that ball. James, you've been doing a bit of work on your swing, haven't you, for a couple of years here. You can see we're not vertical here, so you can see with the grooves pattern that the angle of that strike is coming across there. So what basically that means, if we were to move that strike vertical, we know he's coming in a little bit toe down, and that's at least 1.5 degrees, potentially 2 degrees. So that'd be interesting to see in terms of how that manifests itself in ball flights and misses, and when we have a chat with James about where he's missing it on the golf course. But yeah, they are coming out a little bit too flat for him technically. Don't always necessarily want them soling out flat on the floor. That's another misdemeanor. Some people you can quite easily use lie angle to fit and correct some ball flight. So if this was something that was bothering James, if he was seeing a consistent right miss that was bothering him, because when you've got something that's too flat, is that what you're seeing?
Yeah.
Cool. So an easy win here is going a degree more upright to start with, which will change the direction that Lofts pointing. Obviously, like if that's squarely at the camera, without opening or closing the face here, if I just get the lie angle too flat for him, so the toes down, that loft is now pointing out to the right. Similarly, if they were too upright, that loft would be pointing left. So if you're seeing a little bit of a weaker little miss out to the right, then because of the way you're moving now, things have changed on, you might need to adjust that.
One of my tendencies is to slightly raise the handle, which would then obviously create toe down, which is why as well it's pointing right. So
yeah, exactly that. So you either, and again, that's a discussion you have with the players. That's something you want to address with technique with Clappy, or is that just something you think is going to be within your game?
I think it's within my game. I am trying to obviously limit that, but it is something that, yeah, especially when I get into playing in the season, that's more of a playing golf swing, put it that way.
Yeah.
Just in the defence of the quad,
Go on.
it was 2 degrees flat last time.
There you go.
Yeah.
So maybe my scepticism of technology is unwarranted.
I've invested well, that's what I think. So now that you've got all that information, you can actually just measure up what the 9-iron is, and then you can work every club through from there. He doesn't have to hit every shot with each club, does he? Or each club being marked
Consumer
up.
wise, no. For someone who's playing for a living and of James's level of ability, I think it's something worth doing, because people's patterns can change when they're going up into the longer irons. Not everyone is necessarily a half degree increment change in lie angle throughout. Colin Morikawa, he's an interesting one. He's someone who doesn't even, he puts clubs down on the floor of the tour van, looks at it and says, go more upright on that for me. He's not even really looking at turf interaction, he's looking at how that visually sits to him and looks to his eye, and his lie angles are just all over the shop. They're so inconsistent because he just wants a certain club to look a certain way and perform that way.
Sounds like Paul's clubs.
Yeah, let's not get into Paul's clubs, I'm trying to concentrate already. Loft and Lies lasted well, but then again, so that feeds back in. There's another thing that James was talking about. He's just picked up his 2-iron to stay loose here. That's just something I got to you sort of middle of last summer, wasn't it? Just before British PGA, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yes.
When something had gone wrong, you found a bend in your other 2-iron, hadn't you, or something?
Yeah.
And he's been saying how much he loves this 2-iron. It's tailor-made UDI jobby. Swing weight in D2.5, D3, so that's like basically bang on where his clubs used to sit before the grip change. So it's a bit of a, it will never cease to amaze me how important swing weight is in sets. People are always talking about length, lie, lofts, etc. Swing weight, like boring story, Tom Watson avoided, I think it was his 8-iron for about 3 years because he just couldn't hit it, and then ultimately someone swing weighted it, and for some reason it was coming out about 3 swing weights lighter than the rest of the set. So matching up those discrepancies, basically just it's your timing mechanism. What you want is a swing weight of club and a balance where that weight's distributed around that club, where you can just turn back, turn through without manipulating, throwing your hands, holding it off. It's just going to time and present squarely at the ball. D2 I think is a real sweet spot. Between D2 and D3 is a real sweet spot for James from what we saw historically. And yeah, for me, just the grip change here, whilst it seems innocuous, I'm just moving from one Golf Pro grip to another. 5 grams of difference is not insignificant, and I think that's something that certainly needs addressing. 177 carry, fairly standard for you?
That's how I feel. So when I think I was like 7-iron 177, 8-iron about 166, 9-iron 157, and then suddenly now 9-iron and wedge are like not even close. This now, is showing me, kind of what I feel like I should be doing.
Where was that strike?
Right at the bottom.
Yeah.
That's my sort of tendency a little bit to jump out of it a tiny bit.
What, that's 3-4 yards probably? Carry 175.
174, yeah. Which is no disaster. For a bad swing, I'm losing 3 yards. I'm not gonna.
In a nutshell, that is exactly. I mean, that's just depressingly consistent. 177, 178, 175 in yardage, and you spin 5763, 5751, 5725. There's like 40 revs of spin between those 3 shots, and is why you're a really good player, because you.
I just, like I say, I know exactly what these are going to do. Like if I'm swinging poorly on the day, then that's one of those things. But I've got so much trust and confidence in these because they just do the same thing every time. Whereas when I hit the sort of Titleists, one will just do that, and I just don't feel as confident with it.
Switch over then. I want to see the Titleist, just because where's the 7.9 over there?
I'm not like the looker's not quite the same.
So just getting some numbers
with the Titleist now. T100. So James fitted for these where?
With Ben, the Titleist guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then since they came, when they first came, I think they're supposed to be 1 degree strong, but I've had them bent American Golf and then fiddled around with it Yelverton, just to basically try and match up the numbers exactly with my Srixons. But then obviously every company is different, I'm starting to understand, so I don't know exactly where they are at the moment.
See, it's not affecting spin thus far, but go on, give me one more. It's not a strike again.
They felt as good, if not better, strikes.
Yeah, lovely. Well, they sounded good as well, and that's still a couple of yards shy on carry. Span up a little bit, that one, that was closer to 6. I mean, it's still a low spin for 7 iron, but it's basically on 6,000, that one. I mean, there's not masses of difference between the two. Wouldn't mind having a look at, Dan, are you quad operator?
Yeah.
Can you get the data up so I can see the launch angles between the last 6 shots, please?
Do you notice a difference then between hitting your Srixons to then using the T100? Is there a feel difference?
Not in here.
No.
Not really.
Out on the golf course?
They're the same shaft. I don't know whether when I was trying these I wasn't swinging it particularly well. So definitely I was noticing a higher ball flight. But certainly in here I'm not noticing a massive difference. But yeah, I'm not.
But you're going from a blade to a small cavity in the T100. Do you notice a difference there?
Not massively.
No.
Not
from a feel point of view.
No. Normally I could pick up a club and it'll feel completely different, but I'm holding those at the moment, and yeah, I'm not noticing a massive difference.
And Joe, is there much of a difference? You've looked at the numbers.
Yeah, like static number, like in terms of his launch monitor numbers, he's about 2 or 3 yards down with the Titleist. Spin's not quite as consistent. I mean, we've got a very small sample size there, 3, so we're going to do more on that. But certainly one at the end there jumped up to nearly 6,000 spin, which again is still on the lower end for a 7.9, but it's higher than what we've been seeing with his 5.7, 5.7, 5.7, 5.7 throughout his Srixon. So all of a sudden you get one that's launching a degree and a bit higher and spinning 200 or 300 revs more.
Yeah.
He's going to notice that in flight window, particularly into wind. There is a little discrepancy here in terms of loft. This has got a touch more loft.
Has it?
Than the 7, so I mean, again, like these things move, so no one's to blame. Like if whoever's done this, then no one's to blame. But this is coming in just over 32, probably 32 and a quarter, 32 and a half, whereas your Srixon we've set up at 31 and a half, so it's like a degree and a bit, so it would account for that. So there's just like this. There's a lot to discuss. This is where like fittings with really good players who are like playing for a living aren't your standard. Right? Okay, here's what we're going to pop you in. Let's move on. Like we've got we'll be discussing this over lunch and deciding what the right way to go is, because I could quite easily just in a second I'll bend this down to 31 and a half. We'll see that launch come down. We'll see that spin match up, and they'll probably play pretty similar to how you like. But if again we've got the issue here that this is a full set of T100 cavities, and you possibly like that blade feeling from 7 iron down, so there could be a scope where if we're going to go into these T100s which you've got, we could stick with the 456 in T100s and then look at the 620 MBs, which Dan, you've been a big user of 620 MBs, haven't you?
Love them.
Blend that set, get into the same specs we've got before, and I think you'd be somewhere really close if we match up swing weight to what we had initially, and we blend that. You get that feeling you want from the blades and the workability and the control and the lack of flyers and stuff that you perceive to be a thing. I'm just going to bend this to match the specs, and we can actually see what we get data wise. It'll be really interesting. Perfect. So take a little look to see what this does to it.
I do love the look of those. Didn't quite get it. Oh well, full speed's up already, I didn't even get that.
Yeah. That's 178, 179 through the air with a bad strike. Is that hit?
A little bit bottomy, 176 carry, 125 ball speed. So it's definitely increased on.
Yeah, we were at 124 before, considering that was a slap.
There you go. 125, 175 carry.
Interesting, one spin then. Let me see what that's done to spin wise. Go, just give me 3 more, Jimmy, because I think there's a little bit of discrepancy going on here. Like you say, the first 2 you picked up significant ball speed, like a mile and a bit. Sounds good.
Because I've got 125 again, 176, launch angle 20.6.
So I'm suggesting spin's going to be up again around 6,000 there, I would imagine.
Yeah, because the carry's not really improved, is it?
Nope. Yeah, 5.9 instead of 5.7. So those extra 200 revs. I mean, 177. That's your number, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the number I'm after.
But even those extra it's just such a tough one, isn't it? Because those extra couple hundred revs, how that manifests itself in a 15-20 mile an hour wind is.
Just blows all my mind, this stuff, just how quickly.
Are you into it? Like, is it something that you want to know more about, or are you just happy for someone to tinker away with your...
No, I'm just happy somebody to do it for me. Like, I don't mind, you know, if I'm giving custom fittings or what have you, but for my own, I like to know as little as possible. Basically complete opposite of Paul, really. Like, last time I went to see Joe up in North Devon, this is going back quite a few years now, basically just bang, 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 and I walked out of that studio so happy. Like, I felt like I have got the perfect clubs for me and just go on the course. Whereas if I've been fitted by somebody else, could be a brilliant fitter, but when the clubs get sent to me from the manufacturer, I don't know whether they're quite perfect, which is why I'm way more fussy than I ever used to be. Whereas if I walk out of a session with Joe, I know they've been made to perfection for me, really.
So what's actually really interesting, the boys just chatting behind me, and we've kind of gone round in circles really as to all the different clubs that James has been messing about with in the background here. But the reality is that James has really worn in these Srixon irons, and he's kind of almost worn the grooves down to a point where he's kind of learned how to use them with the spin numbers that they're getting, with the launch characteristics that it's providing for him. So anything that kind of Joe puts him into now is going to spin a fraction more, potentially launch a fraction higher. So the performance of those clubs are going to be very different to what he's been kind of used to. So we'll dive back in now, have a quick chat with him again and find out where we've got to at this point, because I think there's going to be some changes, but it's in what direction Joe wants to take James.
We sort of like went off on a big tangent, didn't we? So like, we're obviously trying to film, but we've got a job to do, because this is quite serious, because he's a player and we need to get this right. So we've had like...
And you're hungry and you want some lunch.
Yeah, starving, and I do like the chicken curry at Churston, so that's going to take a smashing in a minute. But we've got to get this right, and ultimately it's pretty quick with James. So A, we've got a good student who just keeps repeating, so we know what we're getting from a data point of view, so we're not having to hit too many balls. B, I've got historical specs that we set James up in, and like, frankly, you've just played really good. Like, I know you said you've been managing your swing and some certain things over the past few years, but you've just won so many golf tournaments and had so many low scores.
Results-wise, it's been good, yeah.
Yeah, so we know we're not a million miles away ballpark. The first thing that obviously screamed out to me, swing weight, I need to get you back in that sort of D2, D3 sweet spot, which is really easy to do. It's just really good chatting to you more about like how you've really wanted those preferences of blades for control from 7-iron down. Yeah. So that was always going to be a problem. Those T100s, they're designed to give you a little bit more pop. We've just spoken about shaping of some of the irons,
just visually,
didn't necessarily suit your eye as well.
You know, if I look at the two differences here, that's just a lot more rounded, and that really just didn't suit my eye when I looked down at it.
That's a pitching wedge?
Yeah, so if you, it's difficult for you to see down, but just looking at that, it looks completely different to me.
And you got like all of these things in fitting. We can just talk raw data, specs, numbers, all you like, but there's so many unquantifiables of that shape doesn't suit my eye. I don't like how that looks down behind the ball. I don't like the face angle of that address. You know, there's all these unquantifiable things. Feel, again, which is something that doesn't register on a launch monitor, the way these things feel. Yeah. Like, that's all got to be taken into account, but I think we've just got so much good information from that session, from the conversation there. We're going to make a slight line angle change. We're going to go gently with that. I don't want to go like whopping it 2 degrees more upright straight off the bat, because I think you might start to see some different horizontal launch direction. You might start seeing it launching a little bit too far left, but interesting that as well, how some of these equipment things can feed into technique stuff, because you, correct me if I'm wrong here, but like historically you've been telling me like you've steepened a bit in transition at time, and you've been a little bit active with your hands through the ball at times.
Well, I've had to. I basically I've had to raise the handle to get strike.
Yeah.
So therefore, my miss has generally been right. I wouldn't say I've never really got handsy through it.
Okay.
It's more to do with kind of raising the handle. It's probably a bit of early extension because I've steepened here, so I tend to get a little bit back up.
Yeah, interesting. But then, yeah, I just think getting you back into a nice neutral lie angle, getting the lofts back where we need them, and getting that swing weight back in the right space. And I'm going to build you probably 3 options, because what's the right way of putting this with my job as a club reviewer, and particularly irons, a lot of it is by the by between the brands and the models. So the blades from certain companies are all going to perform very similarly. There'll be slight differences in feel and the visual, but the numbers can, if you've got the same loft and you've got the same spec in those clubs, the raw data isn't going to change very much, whether that's the 620 MB from Titleist, whether that's the Srixon blade, whether that's the Tacoma blade. Similarly, if we're going to go 456 in a more, just to give you a little bit of cavity at the top end, which you're used to in the Srixons, you've had ZX7s. If we blended that from tailor-made MBs into the P7 CBs, you know, you're not going to see much difference between ZX7, ZXi7 now, P7 CB necessarily, and even the Tacoma CBs once they're all built to the same spec. It would just be those nuances of, I just prefer the look of that.
Yeah.
That one feels better to me, that's a bit softer. Once we're all set to the same spec, you're going to see very similar launch windows, very similar spin. I'll be interested once we do get these built up, which won't take me long, to see, and again, like we're learning all the time as well, like it'd be interesting to see how new grooves affect spin, because I think inevitably, like Dan said, I think like once we go fresher in grooves, these are, I mean, how old are they? Do you know?
2017.
Yeah, so we've got a few miles on the clock, so those grooves aren't as sharp as they used to be. So I think inevitably we're going to pick up a bit, but from the position we're starting at, where you're kind of spinning that 7 iron at 5.7, 5.8, we've got wiggle room.
Yeah.
And I don't think it will get excessive at all.
No.
So I think we're in a good spot. We've got some really good information, and we can get you built up. And I think key to get those options, because I just want you to, like you said, when you walked away last time, just go, I'm really happy with that. That's all built correct. I like the look of it. Bosh, off we go. You can just go and concentrate on your game then, can't you?
There was no question marks. Whereas for me, like I say, the 2 sets that I've had, again, there's nothing wrong with the manufacturer. It's just for me, they haven't. As soon as I've hit them, I've kind of gone, oh, that's different. And then suddenly there's a question mark there. And sometimes it could be the way you're swinging it. But for me, it was just like, whereas, like I say, when I left your place, I went on the course and I was like, yeah, these are perfect for me. There was no question marks. And if I swung it badly on the day, that's just human error, isn't it?
Right, well, we go default roof settings, back to basics, build some options, and then we'll take your pick.
Perfect.
Well, that was absolutely fantastic. To be a fly on the wall, to listen to what kind of goes through the minds of, well, the player and the fitter, in the detail that these guys have gone into is fantastic. And ultimately, James is playing for his living. So therefore, even though he's experimented with lots of different sets, you know, he's not afraid to spend a bit of money and get the clubs right for what he wants. And that's not always going to work for everybody out there, because you're not playing for money. And James has a very different feel to what works for him compared to, let's say, the average golfer. But to have the opportunity to spend the time with the boys, hopefully you've got something from that. Down there in the comments, anything that jumps out to you I'd like to hear. And if you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. But a big thank you to Joe, a big thank you to Jimbo, and I'll see you again on the next video.